Okay, today I'm going to be talking about David Icke's reptilian theory, how it could work. I'm just basically going over it, talking about the positives and negatives of this theory. David Icke is a popular conspiracy researcher who lives in Britain, Europe, and his views are probably the most controversial in the entire conspiracy movement, mostly because of his reptilian theory, which I'm going to touch on now, and talk about some of the strengths of the theory and the negatives of the theory. Again, I don't support or disapprove of this theory. Again, I like to go over different types of conspiracy theory. I got a huge library of theories, and I'm a big history buff, majored in history in college. I love genetics, science, these type of things. So this is just stuff I like to read and check out. I just wanted to kind of go over this theory and talk about some of the positive and negatives that I do see in this particular point of view. I guess talk about the religious evidence of this theory. First off, since this is, most people that are going to view this are probably going to be Americans, I'm going to go ahead and focus more on like the Christian side of things. But the Christian Bible does make numerous references to lizards and dragons, reptilian entities. You don't have to look much farther than Revelation or even Genesis to see these references. Again, Satan in the Garden of Eden is symbolized as this talking snake, that deceives Eve into eating the apple, and which has basically evoked the wrath of God on everybody, and got Eve blamed for everything apparently, and Satan was blamed for that as a reptile. The Bible also talks about dragons. It symbolizes Satan as a dragon as well. The reptilian references in the Bible are numerous. There's stories from across the world that talk about reptilians. You can go from China, on the other side of the world, all the way around to the Hopi Indians of the United States. There are legends of reptilian entities seeding mankind, creating mankind. The Sumerian clay tablets talk about how the Anunnaki, our reptilian overlords, basically created mankind in clay jars, and how we were a genetically altered species that was basically created to be a slave race to these reptilian overlords. It's nothing new. What David Icke is pulling out isn't something that he pulled out of his ass, basically. This is a theory that has been around for a long time. It's just coming back to light now because again he's putting it back out there. Again, like I said before, Satan is characterized as a dragon in the Bible, so there's definitely some biblical foundation for it for you Christians that may be listening to this. Now again, scientific evidence for the reptilian theory mostly comes from the field of quantum physics, which is basically the study of energy. It's just quanta, these type of things. Again, it's based on the possibility of other dimensions that our five senses cannot access. A lot of what David Icke talks about are lower fourth dimensional reptilians. Now, it's kind of weird words for it. The lower fourth dimension, when put into a Christian context, is basically hell. Lower fourth dimension is always looked at as the hellish realms, no matter where you go back in myth or history, in religion. Lower fourth dimension is the same dimension that Wiccas or satanic occultists will summon their lesser and greater demons from, to work their spells and their magics. These entities are manifesting from the lower fourth dimension, or that's where they believe they're manifesting from. David Icke takes it a step farther and says these reptilians are coming from the lower fourth dimension. These reptilian overlords, basically. What he's basically saying from a Christian perspective is these demons from hell, okay? If you want to put it in a simple context, demons from hell come from this area, okay? They're coming from hell, fourth dimension, period. It's also based on genetic DNA theory, which focuses on 97% junk DNA that exists in us and how it could possibly interface with extra and higher dimensions. Now again, I'll agree there's 97% of our DNA that we don't understand how it works. But again, then to get a conspiracy theory around it saying that, okay, well, this DNA is used to interface with extra and higher dimensions is just speculation. We don't know. Is it possible? For sure. I'm not going to reject it, but you can't prove it either. You can't say this is for sure what it's used for. You can say this is what I believe it's used for based on and introduce your evidence, but you can't pretend like that's fact. You can introduce evidence on a number of things. Even what I'm talking about now, when I say scientific evidence and when I say religious evidence in these last two slides that I've showed, I'm not giving you proof. You can't confuse evidence with proof. Evidence is just facts that are there and that don't really, it doesn't prove the point, but they support the point you're trying to make. So again, that's the way of looking at it. Just because we have 97% junk DNA, we don't know what it's used for. You can't assume that it's used to interface. It's interfacing with higher dimensions. The biggest piece of scientific evidence that I believe are the Dragon Kings, which is basically a bloodline that started back in the ancient world that has since then been exported all over the world, and today manifests as our presidents of the United States, as prime ministers of Britain, world leaders all over the place are part of this Dragon King bloodline, this bloodline that was left behind. There's genealogists that go through this that talk about how all the people in power today are actually related. How significant that is, I don't know. Yeah, I find it disturbing that these people are all cousins basically, and they try to keep it secret that they're all cousins. But again, obsession with genetics goes throughout history. Now, whether or not that's to maintain a certain genetic structure, reptilian genetic structure, who knows? It could just be because they're vain. I mean, sometimes the best answer is the simplest. It could just be because they're pompous, stuck up, elitist pricks. I mean, that could basically be the reason why they're interbreeding with each other. For the same reason that some crazy extremist fundamentalist may take his family off in the middle of the wilderness and make them all interbreed with each other, and then you find them a little bit later. And it's happened a number of times. You can look through different newspapers of people that have isolated themselves from society because they believe that their particular family or bloodline is superior. So it's the basis of all racism. So to say that the elite do it just because they're trying to maintain their reptilian DNA is speculation once again. Now, the positives of the reptilian theory are obvious. First off, it merges literally all conspiracy. There isn't a conspiracy theory that isn't included. I mean, whether you're talking about UFOs, whatever, mind control, it's all part of the conspiracy when we're talking about the reptilian theory. David Icke literally covers it all. Many conspiracy researchers won't go where David Icke goes. This is an advantage to David Icke because, again, when you have an incomplete theory that leaves things out, it eliminates credibility. If you're going to put out a conspiracy theory, it's got to cover everything. And I think David Icke does that really nicely with his theory. It exposes satanic ritual abuse. Again, there's not a lot of conspiracy theorists to touch on this. Satanic ritual abuse is huge. Without getting into it, you can just pick up a newspaper and read about child sacrifice or just some of the dark shit that people do every day in the newspaper. And a lot of it, people don't pay attention to because they're kind of conditioned to not really pay attention to it. But satanic ritual abuse is huge. There's organizations that combat this. Actual official organizations that are there to help get people away from satanic ritual abuse. It's such a big problem. So I like how David Icke touches that in his conspiracy theories, even if it's completely wrong. The reason why he believes satanic ritual abuse exists, I like the fact that he's bringing it to light. It lays out the basis of occult sciences such as astrology, numerology, satanic ritual, and alchemy. Now, again, a lot of Christians are going to say, well, why the hell would I want to know that? It's not important to me. Well, it doesn't matter if it's important to you. The fact of the matter is the people that are in power, the people that are in control, that are dictating to your life, are using these things. Especially astrology and numerology. These are huge to the elite. Everything they do is astrology and numerology. Whether you're talking about Freemasonry, you're talking about these different types of secret societies, Skull and Bones. Astrology and numerology plays a big part in everything they do. And if you don't understand that, you're going to have a hard time understanding what the organization is all about. So again, I like how David Icke touches on all that stuff, and he brings that stuff to light because it helps making the overall conspiracy easier to understand when you understand the focus that's coming from these conspirators. Now, the negatives of the reptilian theory are obvious too. First off, it's tough to swallow. You can't, when you hear blood-sucking reptilians, you're immediately turned off, period. I don't care who you are. It takes some research. Second off, there's so much research required to even grasp the basics. Like for someone like me who studied history for a long time, I hear the reptilian theory is just a modern day reenactment of something that went on thousands of years ago. It's nothing new. I've heard about the reptilian theory throughout my education, but to a lot of people, it's new. They the first time they hear it from David Icke, and so they're hearing from David Icke, it's not a believable thing. So it is tough to stomach. It alienates fundamental religionists, and it also alienates the UFO community, which is 75% of the conspiracy community. It manages to piss off both groups, so that works against David Icke. Again, when the reason why it makes the UFO community mad is because he vilifies a lot of these extraterrestrials. And again, it's weird. These extraterrestrials to the UFO community become like gods. They worship these extraterrestrials. They want them so much to be good. And the result is they get mad, when people come out and say that they're evil. So again, I mean, that's just basically in a nutshell. I think that David Icke is doing a good job with his with putting out information. Whether he's right or wrong is irrelevant. I think that's the point that a lot of people make. I think even David Icke, what he talks about, says that the points that he make are, it doesn't matter if you agree with him or not. He's just getting information out. It's up to the individual to decide what part of the information they want to accept and reject. And again, that's empowerment. You can't censor something. You just got to kind of put it out the way it is. So overall, I think the reptilian theory has more positives than negatives, and I think that it does bring, just an overall positive type of information to the research community.